Welcome to Murfreesboro Storytellers. Our program today is originating from the Bradley Historical Museum, formerly Bradley Academy historically, and we're here to talk about Black History Month. We have two ladies as our guests today to tell about this, and we appreciate having them, Wilma McLean and Mary Watkins. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
February
today.
being Black History Month and a lot of events going on, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. On Saturday they will be having one here at Bradley Academy Museum at 10 o'clock. I think it's from 10 to 2. And it's talking about the past, present, and the future. And also, I'm the president of the African American Heritage Society of Rutherford County, and we will be having one on February the 15th at 11 o'clock at Patterson Community Center in partnership with the Stones River National Battlefield and Patterson Center, and of course the African American Heritage Society. And ours is also entitled Reflection, Past, Present, and the Future.
Very good. Okay.
And everything or whatever. So, but like I said, I'm the president of the African American Heritage Society, and Wilma is one of the board members.
Okay.
And everything. And we started the African American Heritage Society back in 2014, and through the vision of Dr. George Smith. Or whatever, he felt like we needed that to really to do some research and document the history of African Americans in Rutherford County.
Okay.
And we started out doing the Wisdom of the Elders, where we worked with seniors, African American seniors that were 65 and up. And we, one of the components were genealogy, documenting churches, cemeteries, and everything. And out of that, he decided we need to do a little bit more than that. We were going to go and just do the cemeteries because when we started doing the genealogy research, we found that a lot of the African American cemeteries was not documented and everything. So we decided, you know, okay, let's do that. And then we changed it to the African American Heritage Society. And needless to say, we have uncovered a lot of history here that we did not know about.
Sure. While we're talking about history there, before we get too deep into it, let's talk about where we are, the history of this building that we're originating from. Growing up, this was the school for the African American community when I was growing up in this town.
Right, and of course I lived out in the country, and I did not go to this school, Bradley School. And of course it started back, like you said, in the late 1800s or whatever, and it was the first African American school within the city of Murfreesboro. And then of course from there they went on and they established Holloway High School and the Bradley that's over on Mercury now and everything. So, but yeah, and a lot of people, you know, went to this school. Not my generation, some of the generation before me. And like I said, I went to a school out in the country. I did not go to school here.
Did you go to Walter Hill?
Walter Hill. I went to Bethel Church School, and also even before that, I was at Dilton. My parents were sharecroppers. So if you know anything about sharecroppers, they moved around and everything. So I went from Dilton School to Bethel School, and of course, and then Holloway. And I was during that time when we were not integrated. So I did not go to an integrated school until I went to Middle Tennessee State University in the 60s.
Wilma, where did you go to school?
I went to school, to every school but in Murfreesboro but Reeves Rogers.
Oh,
we moved around a lot too.
Okay.
So I started off at Bradley, what
Mercury.
we call the new Bradley on Mercury. And then we went to Bellwood, and I went to Mitchell Nelson, I went to Christiana, Hopgood. Like I said, every school we had at that time.
My good. That's interesting. Very good.
Yeah, we lived out on where World Outreach is. It used to be, I don't know if you heard about the Camel Brown. He had horses.
I remember Campbell Brown.
Well, we lived there, and then we moved there to the Siegel Farm. Our house was right there where the Siegel High School is. And we stayed there. My parents, we raised cotton and everything, and then we left there, and then we went to the Morgan Green where the Red Rose ice cream. So we went there and we met cows and everything or whatever. So, and that being said, at that time I wasn't really interested in history and everything, and I didn't really get involved with it until I started doing research on family history and everything. So, and then that's how I really got involved doing research and everything. It was very interesting. So I did a few classes working with young people as well as some seniors and everything. So when we started this program, under the wisdom of the elders, I was doing the genealogy part. Dr. Smith was doing the churches and cemeteries. And then Barbara and Leroy Hodges, they were doing the art. We had to do some kind of paintings based on some life experiences and everything, or whatever. So with that, then we got, like I said, with the African American Heritage Society, and we have found so much information about African Americans here in Murfreesboro. You know, a lot of times we talk about slavery and all this kind of stuff, but we wanted to go beyond that, and we felt like that the African Americans here in Rutherford County had a lot of footwork in Rutherford County to be as it is now, and everything. So that's how we got involved with that. Kelly House, for instance, I don't know. She was born here, but she ended up, after she married Mr. William House, she moved to Nashville. But we found out she was one of the first people to try to get reparation for ex-slaves, and everything. Of course, it wasn't too favorable with some people, and they end up locking her up and got her for mail fraud and everything. She was born here in Rutherford County.
About when did she live? When?
She was born in 1861, and she died in the early 1900s.
Okay. All right.
And matter of fact, Vanderbilt has an endowment in her name, and all. Whatever. Born right here in Murfreesboro. Samuel Keeble. He was born out in Jefferson on the Keeble plantation.
I know of the Keeble family. Right.
And everything. He was one of the first legislators, black African American legislators that we have down at the Capitol, and everything. He moved to Nashville. He worked for a couple of newspaper companies here in Murfreesboro as a presser, and he started working, I think it was around about the age of 19. And then later on, he moved to Nashville. He opened up a barbershop there, and he got into politics and everything, or whatever. So we're just finding so much that we did not know about. And I think that's the enjoyment of it. And we want to preserve that history. Like I said, we're educating ourselves, but we want to leave it for the generation to come so that they would know about the African Americans, why it's important to have Black History Month. But my thing is, what surprises me, here it is 2020, and we still having Black History Month. I feel like Black history should be a part of history, American history. And hopefully someday we won't have to set aside a month for that. And I remember when I was teaching at Riverdale High School, and we used to have the programs for during February. And one young lady, she was a Caucasian child, white, and everything, and she was a part of it. And she said, you know, I don't understand why you all have Black History Month. You know, nobody else have that. Have a month set aside. And I said, well, I want you just to think about this. I said, we have 1 month. I said, but people have it every month, the 12 months out of a year. And we have to have 1 month that we set aside for us to be recognized, and it shouldn't be that way. And everything. Today I was thinking about Peter Jennings. I didn't know that much about him. I don't know if you've heard about Peter Jennings. He fought in the, I think in the Revolutionary War or whatever. He came in here from Rhode Island, and I was just wondering, I need to research in what brought him from Rhode Island to Murfreesboro. And he had a bakery on Vine Street. And I understand too, I just recently found out, and I'm going to have to dig a little bit more about it, said that he had something about the infrastructure, having the water lines and all that kind of stuff here, because that's something he did when he was in service, and everything. So I'm going to find a little bit more about him and everything. He was buried over here in the city cemetery.
Did you find what did attract him to come to Murfreesboro?
No, I have not, and that's what I'm going to have to find out.
interesting.
What brought him to Murfreesboro all the way from Rhode Island? And I know he had a bakery there on Vine Street, and everything. So I'm really interested in that. So, like I said, we're just finding a lot of information that we did not know about,
Sure.
and everything, and that's what's so amazing about it.
Wilma, we go way back to Murfreesboro Bank and Trust Company, I guess.
Yes, we do.
Mid-South Bank. And you retired just recently from MTSU, I believe.
That is correct.
Right. Tell us about your role in the African American Heritage Society. I see you have the shirt on, designated that, the logo.
Well, I started, I think, about 2016. They had already been established
Sure.
when I found about it. And like Mary, I was doing my family research. And Dr. Smith was my mother's doctor, and she was telling him about me doing research. And he said, well, she should join us. So, of course, over the time I've been with the organization, I have found out so much. For instance, my ancestors, one of my ancestors, was some of the first families to settle in the cemetery community. And he was a U.S. colored troop. He was born in North Carolina. They took him to Georgia. He ended up in Alabama, and then he come up here to Tennessee, and they settled in that area. He was part of the 114th, I think it is. And they was the one to re-intern the soldiers into the cemetery.
And the cemetery community is out in the county.
It's Old Nashville Highway.
Oh, out off the old Nashville Highway, right? I remember that.
Yeah. But since I've been part of the African American Society, I have learned so much. I did not realize we had so much history just in Rutherford County, because we're not taught that in school. We weren't taught that in school. We were just taught the standard history.
Sure, right.
So we want to make sure, especially I want to make sure my kids know that we are contribute to this area. We just didn't exist. We helped build it.
Mary, you haven't mentioned Dr. Patterson, who was the African-American dentist here for many years.
Yes.
More recent than the people you've been talking about.
Yes, Dr. Patterson. Matter of fact, I knew him back in, I think he died around about 1969, somewhere during that time. And I remember him being the only African-American dentist that we had
That's
here.
true.
And everything, or whatever. He came in, I think, from North Carolina, and my maiden name is Patterson.
Oh, is it?
So I've
Okay.
done a little research on
Okay.
him to see if there is some
In
connection,
relation.
and I have not found it yet, or whatever. But he came by way from North Carolina, went to Meharry Medical College, and from there he came to Murfreesboro, and I think he had an office somewhere before he moved to University Street. He was on the Mix Slide.
Okay.
He had a dental office there. So he started his practice here, and he was really involved in the community. I found out he started the Rutherford County voting, I don't forgot the exact name of it, but anyway, he started that about the voting within our community. He was on a lot of different boards here and everything, or whatever. So
Yeah, he was very instrumental in helping with the African American community.
Yes.
I remember when I was with Samsonite as personnel manager, Dr. Patterson called up and said, Mr. Hood, I want to know how many of my people you have out there.
yeah, really, yeah.
Always looking after.
Yeah, he went. I think he was there also at First Baptist Church. He was a trustee on the, worked in the church a lot. But he was really involved in the community. He was instrumental in a lot of different things that took place here, and that's the reason why he got his name and everything. People advocated for his name to be on the Patterson Community Center
Yes,
because of the work that he had done and everything within this community, and to honor his work, they wanted to do that and everything. And I want my children to know that. Why is
Sure,
it Patterson Community Center?
Yeah. For
And,
whom is it named?
That's right, and everything. So I think that's very important. And Mr. Same as like Mr. Robert T90 Scales
Oh, yes.
and
I was
Miss
going to ask you
Mary
about
Scales.
T90.
Yes, and I been knowing him, a part of him, because of the fact being a mortician, and my parents, my grandfather, I understand, and his father were good friends.
I grew up with T90 and served on the city school board with him for many years.
Right, and he was very, Rutherford County, when we made the transition during the period of integration, he was one of the ones that sort of kept everything intact. We didn't have a lot of problems like some of the
That is
cities
very true.
did.
He was very instrumental.
He was very instrumental he would always come in and work with both races to resolve situations before it got out of hand and everything. And we don't know, I'm sure he took a lot for us that a lot of us do not realize
sure
that and everything. But he was always there trying to keep things in control or whatever. And I think that's the reason why the transition wasn't as bad. We had some issues, but I don't think it was as bad as some places because of Mr. Scales.
You mentioned mink slide a minute ago.
Yes.
For those listening and watching, they probably don't know what was mink slide.
Well, mink slide is where most of the African American business was back in the day. And I remember as a child, they used to talk about the mink slide. There were 4 siblings that was older than me, so they got to go to the mink slide. On Saturday night, it was like a gathering for the African Americans and everything or whatever. And I couldn't wait till I got to the mink slide. What was it about? And everything. When I got old enough, my parents allowed me to come to go to the mink slide with my sister and everything. There were, like I said, the Scales, they owned the Friendly Spot Cafe. They had a pool hall there. The Keebles had a pool hall. I remember Mr. Fred Malone around the corner on Vine Street. He had a barber shop there.
And this was essentially South Maple and Vine, that area.
Yes,
right
that's
there,
that thoroughway where you would come in, like from Lebanon. That's you go right down through the mink slide, and everything. And that's where most of our business was. Mr. Woodson had a store there, and everything or whatever. And then right down below that, you had what you call the bottoms. And that's where the city hall is now. Of course, they've built it up, and I have a picture of that. Somebody donated one to us back in the day, or whatever. It was in the lower part, and I think it flooded a lot.
Always
and they
flooded
called
when
it,
we had a big heavy rain. That's
yes,
correct,
and they called it the bottoms and stuff. So, and of course, as people, they moved them out, and they built that up.
Yeah, many houses were built on stilts to avoid being flooded.
Yeah.
Mink slide, as I recall, the name came about when citizens of the community would kill mink or other animals and bring their hides to town to sell them, and that got to be known as mink slide.
And also they said that because of the slope that it has, even it's there now when you come there, maybe you got that little slope, and they said also people, they would slide to bringing those minks in, and they would slide down through there, so it got the name, they started calling it the mink slide, and everything or whatever, but yeah, it was sort of a gathering on the weekend and everything where we would just go and gather and just walk up and down the street and socialize with different, people, the families and stuff like that. And from there, I remember they called it the Colored Fair that was there where the Patterson Center is. Yeah. And,
around Holloway and
yes, and
Holloway.
I got a picture of myself back in the day. The schools would allow us during the day, to come to the Colored Fair, they called it, and they would allow, we competed against other schools of crocheting, doing different things. People would bring the animals in and they would judge them and all of that. They had rides and stuff, where they were there at the Patterson Center. And a lot of out here lately, I've been just looking around and trying to figure out, with the center being there, how things have changed. And you just can't really see how that landscaping was back in the day when we had the Colored Fair, and also Holloway High School, and they had the football field there.
Had some great football teams, as I recall.
Yes, and
I remember when Tommy Lee was the quarterback.
Tommy Lee.
The call was 1, 2, 3. Give the ball to Tommy Lee.
And everything. Yeah, it's just time certainly bring about a change, but we want to preserve that history. for the generations to come, so that they would know from whence they came and everything. And I think it's very important that we do that. And a lot of times I say we talk about things, the issues, things that took place, and everything is not to use it as a stumbling block, but we want our generation to see what their foreparents, our ancestors went through for things to be better for them. And a thing for the African American theme this year is the African American vote. And we want to stress that with the young people. So many people lost their lives. They have obligated to go to the poll and vote, because that's their power, that's their voice. If you want a change to come, you have to vote and everything. You take T90 Scales, he would not been able to be a city councilman or whatever had not it been for the vote. And we have to realize that and get out and really vote. Not only us, but everybody need to do that.
Absolutely.
If you want to change, that's your voice. That's how you make changes, to let your voice be heard and everything.
Is voting among the African community down? Or
Well, I think it's in phases. It depends on who's running or
True.
whatever, rather than, I think it's something that we need to do all the time.
Oh, absolutely.
Because of the fact that, the decisions that's being made, that's governing your life, you need to vote
for sure.
and everything. And I think it depends on, and I think not only with the African American voters, I think it's for all,
everyone.
everyone.
Absolutely.
It depends on what it is. When the president, time for elect the president, we tend to turn out, or we need to look at our local things that's going on when people are running or whatever. We need to turn out and vote and let our voice be heard.
And the presidential election will be later this year.
It's going to be later on this year and everything or whatever. And we just need to get out and vote all the time, not depending on what the issue is and everything. I feel like we're obligated to do that. And I remember, as far as I can remember, my mother always voted.
Oh, sure.
And that was something that she instilled in us. And I remember, I started voting at 18, and I missed one year, and I felt so guilty. I felt like I had let my mother down. I felt like I had let my ancestors down because of what they went through in order for us to vote. And I have a concern, seem like, history repeats itself. If you don't know your history, if you don't know, it's doomed to repeat itself. So that's why we are just really stressing, to vote. I stress that with my grandkids, When you turn 18, you need to go and register. You need to vote.
Wilma, what particularly do you feel important about the African American heritage of society that you're working in? What do you like to do especially?
It's a little hard to determine what it is I like to do, because I like all of it. I like uncovering the mystery, the digging.
Okay.
To find out
Give us an example.
Okay, well, Mary mentioned earlier Miss Callie Guy House being one of the first to try to get reparations. And for ex-slaves, I don't remember reading anything or hearing anything about anyone else trying. And she left her children to travel to be able to do this. She just didn't do it right here in Rutherford County or Tennessee. She was all over helping set up societies. And because of her, a lot of benevolent societies, I do believe, are set up to take care of the people when they pass and they don't have family or didn't have family who can help them to be buried. So she started a movement there. Just the history of just knowing that our people were so instrumental in doing so much that we have no clue, and then digging it up and letting everybody know that, yes, we did contribute. We did do this, we did do that.
And we are trying to get markers. We just recently had one installed for Holloway High School, being the first African American high school in Rutherford County, serving all of Rutherford County. And we have another one we have is in the making for Mary Allen Vaughn. And that was one lady.
Yes,
yes, we're going to have one. I talked to Miss Wim It should be here in probably next month or so, and we're going to install that there on South Highland, right where you go into the projects. Her house was there, and they tore that down to go in for that entrance where you go into the they call it Parkside now, and everything. And I was reading about her. She started the first African American newspaper here in Murfreesboro, the Murfreesboro Union. And not all of that, she started a school for the adults. And one of her main things was for them to learn to read and write so they could vote.
Okay.
And she also worked for the Commonwealth department where she was a nurse. And she wanted to improve the rural health in the country and stuff. So she did that, going out into the different counties or whatever to work within the school system, promoting good health and everything. So she was another one. Vaughn Street was named after her. I knew it was Vaughn Street.
I didn't realize that.
Right, and I remember calling John, and he said, well, you need to go to the planning and find out. So I got in touch with one of the older citizens, Miss Dorothy Orr, and I said, Miss Dorothy Orr, I know I researched, and Marietta Vaughn's house was here, her newspaper, where she, did a newspaper and everything or whatever. And she was also worked there on Vine Street, where she published some of her work there on Vine Street. And I said, is Vaughn Street named after her? She said, yes, they did, in her honor, because they tore her house was torn down and everything or whatever, and they just want to honor her by naming that street after her and everything. So that was another thing. We didn't know why it was named Vaughn Street or whatever. So, but, and just things like that, just incidents like that we are just uncovering our history that we didn't know about.
Sure.
And everything or whatever. So
let's re-emphasize the events that are going on during Black History Month as we conclude the program.
Okay, like I said, here at Bradley, they're going to do one here on Saturday, starting at 10 o'clock, and that's February the 1st. And then the African American Heritage Society will have one it would be at Patterson Community Center, there in the Mary Scales dining area, and it's going to be February 15th, and it starts at 11 o'clock. And I was going to be reflecting the reflection of the past, present, and the future. We're going to be talking about people in the past that have contributed to this community. William Holland from down at the cemetery community, he was in the 111th Colored Troop and everything. He once the war was over with, he settled in that community and everything or whatever. He was buried there on his property there. We're going to also be talking about the Rowena Mentor. She was one of the last persons to sell her land under eminent domain when the Stones River National Park came in. She would be one of the other ones. Also Samuel Keeble. We're going to recognize him as well. Dr. Patterson is one of the ones on my list, as well as Mr. and Mrs. Scales. Yes, for talking about the past. And then, of course, the future, we're going to have people that's still here. We want them to talk about themselves, like Councilman Madeline Scales, Vice Mayor Madeline Scales, Florence Smith, or whatever. We want these people to represent themselves, to talk about themselves. And also we're going to try, we're trying to get Gloria Bonner. We want her, if possible, for her to talk about the future, how important it is, for the young people, to look at the present to see whose shoulders they're standing on, what these people have done in the past for them to be where they are now. And it's up to them to keep this going and everything to be make their life better, for them to be successful and everything or whatever.
Ladies, wonderful. It sounds like a great month celebrating Black history. We congratulate you. We thank you for coming and sharing this with our audience so they'll know more about the history of this community generally, and especially the Black history.
Yes, and we appreciate you having us here today and everything. And I have enjoyed this or whatever, and I enjoy talking about the past, the present, and what's going to be for the future, whatever. So,
Wilma McLean and Mary Watkins, thank you so much for joining us on Murfreesboro Storytellers.
Thank you.
Thank you.